The year 2025 opens with the Caribbean Sea on edge. US and Venezuelan forces face off, warships and militias mobilized. The turquoise waters, usually a symbol of tropical calm, are now a stage for a tense military standoff. The world's attention is fixed on this region, as the possibility of conflict threatens to disrupt not only the Caribbean, but the entire Western Hemisphere. The world watches as American naval power meets Venezuela's defiant military buildup. US aircraft carriers and destroyers cut imposing silhouettes against the horizon, while Venezuelan frigates and patrol boats maneuver defiantly nearby. The air is thick with uncertainty as both sides test each other's resolve with calculated shows of strength. President Maduro rallies his armed forces and civilian militias, vowing to defend Venezuela's sovereignty. In fiery speeches, he calls on his people to resist foreign intervention, painting the standoff as a fight for national dignity. Across the country, soldiers march in formation and civilian militias train in city squares, determined to show unity in the face of external pressure. Years of sanctions, failed diplomacy and mutual suspicion have led to this boiling point. International efforts to mediate have repeatedly broken down, leaving both sides entrenched. The closure of embassies and the withdrawal of diplomats have only deepened the sense of isolation and mistrust. Both governments blame each other, each claiming to defend against foreign aggression. In press conferences and televised addresses, leaders on both sides accuse their opponents of provocation and destabilization, fueling a war of words that echoes across global media. For ordinary people, the fear is real. The threat of open war looms larger than ever. Families gather around televisions, anxiously awaiting updates while shortages of food and medicine grow more severe. The uncertainty of what tomorrow may bring weighs heavily on everyone, from bustling Caracas to remote coastal villages. The U.S. cites security and anti-drug efforts. Officials argue that increased naval presence is necessary to combat trafficking and protect regional stability. They point to a surge in smuggling operations and claim that Venezuela's instability threatens to spill over into neighboring countries. Venezuela calls it imperialism and a grab for oil. Government officials and protesters alike denounce what they see as foreign interference, insisting that the true motive is control over Venezuela's vast natural resources. Murals and banners across the country echo this sentiment, fueling a sense of national resistance. The crisis is rooted in history, economics, and geopolitics, far more than a simple clash of good versus evil. Decades of strained relations, economic sanctions, and shifting alliances have created a complex web of grievances and ambitions. The current standoff is the latest chapter in a long saga of mistrust and confrontation. The visible military moves are just the surface of a much deeper conflict. Behind the scenes, intelligence agencies, cyber units, and diplomatic channels are all engaged in a high-stakes game of strategy and brinkmanship. Every maneuver is carefully calculated as both sides seek to avoid open war while refusing to back down. To understand what's at stake, we must look at the incidents and motivations that brought us to the brink. Only by examining the tangled history, the economic pressures, and the political ambitions on both sides can we grasp the true danger of this Caribbean standoff and what the future might hold for the region and the world. The spark that would ignite a global crisis, September 3, 2025. On this seemingly ordinary day, a single event would set off a chain reaction, the consequences of which would ripple far beyond the Caribbean Sea. Early that morning, a U.S. Coast Guard cutter patrolling international waters near Venezuela detected a vessel moving erratically. The crew, on high alert due to recent tensions in the region, moved to intercept the boat as it edged closer to the maritime boundary. According to U.S. officials, the intercepted boat ignored repeated radio calls and visual signals. When the vessel suddenly changed course, heading directly toward the Coast Guard cutter, the crew responded with warning shots. But the situation escalated rapidly. Within moments, disabling fire was ordered, striking the vessel and bringing it to a halt. Venezuela's government immediately condemned the action, insisting the targeted boat was nothing more than a harmless fishing vessel operating within Venezuelan waters. They reported casualties among the crew, fueling outrage and sorrow across the nation. The incident exploded across global media. Washington quickly released surveillance footage, attempting to justify the Coast Guard's actions and show the vessel's suspicious maneuvers. Caracas countered with graphic images of the damaged boat, highlighting bullet holes and injured fishermen. The government accused the U.S. of a reckless and deadly attack. The US framed the incident as a necessary anti-drug operation, claiming the intercepted vessel matched the profile of known traffickers and posed a real threat to regional security. Venezuela, however, called it a brutal act of aggression, accusing the US of violating its sovereignty and targeting innocent civilians. Protests erupted in Caracas, with citizens demanding justice and accountability. Both sides refused to back down. President Maduro appeared on national television, vowing to seek justice for the victims and defend Venezuela's honor at any cost. Meanwhile, US officials stood firmly behind their crew, insisting that the Coast Guard acted in self-defense and followed strict protocols. Venezuelan state media fanned the flames, portraying the US as a bully intent on destabilizing the region. News anchors condemned the attack, fueling public anger and suspicion. The incident quickly became a rallying cry. Across Venezuela, people took to the streets, waving flags and demanding unity in the face of what they saw as foreign aggression. The tragedy united the nation, if only for a moment, against a common adversary. As propaganda and misinformation spread on both sides, the truth became increasingly difficult to discern. Each government pushed its own narrative, leaving ordinary people confused and fearful about what might come next. The standoff at sea hardened into a diplomatic crisis. With military forces on alert and the world's attention fixed on the region, the international community braced for a dangerous escalation that could change the course of history. Washington justifies its actions as a response to threats from Venezuela: drugs, instability, and authoritarianism. The US claims Maduro's regime is tied to drug cartels and undermines regional security. Warships and surveillance are framed as defensive, not aggressive. The message: deter smugglers, warn Caracas, reassure allies. The US refuses to recognize Maduro, backing opposition and pushing for regime change. Officials insist diplomacy is preferred, but all options are on the table. The strategy is risky, meant to pressure but easily misread as a prelude to war. The line between deterrence and escalation grows dangerously thin. In Caracas, the US presence is seen as imperialism, not security. Maduro dons military fatigues, mobilizes the army and vast civilian militias, and vows to resist invasion. The Bolivarian militia, hundreds of thousands strong, is activated, symbolizing mass resistance. Venezuela appeals to the UN and allies like Russia and China, framing the crisis as a fight against US domination. State media floods the airwaves with patriotic messages, urging unity. Economic hardship is blamed on US sanctions, not government mismanagement. The regime uses the threat to rally support and justify tighter control. The nation braces for conflict, united by fear and defiance. At the heart of the crisis is oil, an essential resource that fuels economies and powers nations. Venezuela, with its vast oil reserves, stands as a strategic prize coveted by many. The country's oil wealth has long been a double-edged sword, offering both prosperity and conflict. Venezuela's vast reserves are a strategic prize, holding the potential to influence global oil markets and geopolitical dynamics. These reserves are not just a source of wealth but a tool of power and leverage on the international stage. US-Venezuela oil ties soured under Chavez and Maduro, as their policies diverged sharply from US interests. The nationalization of oil assets and the imposition of sanctions have further strained relations, leading to a significant decline in production and investment. With nationalizations and sanctions crippling production, Venezuela's oil industry has faced a steep decline. Once a thriving sector, it now struggles under the weight of political and economic pressures, leaving infrastructure in disrepair. The US wants a stable, friendly government to restore oil flows and investment. American interests are keen on reviving the once lucrative oil trade, seeing it as a pathway to economic and strategic gains. For Maduro, oil is survival, a lifeline for his administration amidst economic turmoil. Control of PDVSA, the state oil company, means control of the country's economic future and political stability. Control of PDVSA means control of the country. It is the backbone of Venezuela's economy, and its management is crucial for maintaining power and influence both domestically and internationally. Venezuela sees US pressure as a bid to seize its resources, interpreting sanctions and diplomatic moves as attempts to undermine its sovereignty. The narrative of resistance against foreign intervention resonates deeply within the nation. The conflict is also ideological, a clash between US democracy and Venezuelan socialism. This ideological battle shapes the discourse, influencing public opinion and international alliances. US democracy versus Venezuelan socialism. This ideological divide is not just about governance but about the future direction of the region and the world, with each side advocating for its vision of society. Washington cites human rights abuses and regional instability as reasons for its stance, arguing that its actions are in defense of democratic principles and regional security. Venezuela, backed by allies, frames itself as resisting US hegemony. With support from countries like Russia and China, it positions itself as a bulwark against Western influence, seeking to forge a new path in global politics. The standoff is about more than oil. It's a complex interplay of economic interests, political ideologies, and global power dynamics. The outcome of this conflict could reshape alliances and alter the balance of power. It's a test of competing worldviews, where the stakes are high and the implications far-reaching. The resolution of this standoff will not only impact Venezuela and the US, but could also influence the future of international relations and global stability. The crisis is global. Russia and China back Venezuela, challenging US dominance. Russia supplies weapons, advisors, and diplomatic cover, using Venezuela to counter US influence. China's support is economic. Loans and oil deals secure its interests. Both powers see Venezuela as a strategic foothold in the Americas. Their involvement turns the standoff into a proxy conflict in a new multipolar world. Any US action risks confrontation with Russian arms or Chinese investments. The stakes are higher than ever. One misstep could trigger a wider crisis. The presence of these powers makes military intervention far more dangerous. Despite the saber-rattling, most experts say full-scale war is unlikely, too costly, too unpredictable. Venezuela's military, militias, and terrain would make any invasion a nightmare. The US remembers Iraq and Afghanistan. Occupation is the real challenge. No clear exit, no appetite for another quagmire. War would spike oil prices, wreck economies, and isolate the US and Latin America. Even US critics of Maduro oppose intervention. Yet the risk of accidental escalation is real. One clash could spiral out of control. Limited strikes or tit-for-tat responses could ignite a broader conflict. The region stands on a knife's edge, hoping cooler heads prevail. As one analyst warns, nobody wants war, but we're closer than we think. The standoff is haunted by a century of US intervention in Latin America. From military occupations to CIA-backed coups, the US legacy is one of suspicion and resentment. Venezuela's leaders invoke this history, casting themselves as defenders against Yankee imperialism. This narrative rallies support at home and sympathy abroad, deflecting blame for internal failures. US actions, seen as justified in Washington, are viewed as aggression in the region. Even limited shows of force can backfire, strengthening the very regimes the US opposes. The past shapes every move, making simple solutions impossible. History warns, intervention has consequences that last for generations. Warships patrol, militias drill, the world waits. Will diplomacy win, or is war inevitable? Escalation is easy, peace is hard. Both sides must step back. US incentives, Venezuelan concessions, and international mediation are needed. Trust is scarce, but the alternative is disaster. Regional powers and the UN could help broker talks. Publics in both countries are wary of war, pushing leaders toward negotiation. The crisis is about oil, ideology, and shifting global power. The cost of conflict is catastrophic. Only diplomacy offers hope. The world watches, hoping reason prevails over rhetoric. On the brink of war, peace remains possible, if leaders choose it.